Well, Donald Trump's law and order message to his convention playing into international concerns about security. And this morning, German police continue to investigate the shooting rampage that left 9 people dead, 16 others wounded, and the gunman dead as well. They say it's not terrorism. A gunman opened fire in a Munich shopping mall and nearby restaurant Friday night before fleeing the scene. The body of the gunman found about half a mile away. Police say he took his own life. NBC's Lucy Kavanaugh is in Munich for us this morning. And Lucy, what else do we know this morning?
Good morning, Chris. Based on what we've heard from Munich authorities so far, this appears to be the work of one deeply disturbed individual. No connections at this point to ISIS or to any other terrorist networks. No indications, in fact, that he worked with anyone else at all. Munich prosecutors telling us the shooter was an 18-year-old German-Iranian born and raised in Munich. They say that he may have been seeking or getting treatment for some sort of a mental illness. He was not known to authorities. He did not have any sort of police record. One thing that they did uncover through a visit to his home was what they described as a fascination with mass shootings. They found documents detailing rampages, including a book, in fact, called Why Kids Kill, about school shootings in the United States. And they do think that this appears to be a premeditated attack. There's some evidence that he had hacked a Facebook account of another individual and tried to lure people into that shopping center behind me, where he carried out that shooting spree, offering some sort of a free giveaway. There are also questions about the timing, of course, of this attack, yesterday being the 5-year anniversary of the Breivik massacre in Norway that saw 77 people dead through a series of shootings and bombings. And of course, gun violence may be a topic of frequent discussion now in the United States. Not so in Germany. There are very strict gun laws here. It's very difficult to get your hands on weapons, and police say that he had a 9mm pistol and potentially as many as 300 rounds on him, potentially obtaining that illegally. Chris?
Lucy, thank you very much. I want to bring in Malcolm Nance, Executive Director of Terrorist Metrics Project and an MSNBC terrorism analyst. Let me pick up on a couple things she just said, because it seems to me that there are some similarities to a lot of these shootings that we've seen before. First of all, some possibility that he had suffered from depression, had some mental illness issues. Also, this occurred on the 5th anniversary of the Breivik massacre in Norway. 77 people were killed. Right. So many things about these kinds of shootings, both domestically and abroad, that seem to carry this common thread.
Well, you're absolutely right. And we were discussing a little earlier some of the similarities of teen depression and the Columbine shootings. But what I'm starting to see here over the last few weeks is the trend of where you have international terrorist activities and inspired operations like we saw in Nice, the attack that happened in Bangladesh. And then we start seeing what I call psycho-grievance, people who have psychological defects or mental health issues who are actually trained, like we saw in Dallas and Baton Rouge. And then we see other people jumping onto the media bandwagon like we saw in Germany. A young man suffered from depression, turns out wasn't an act of terrorism. All of these things are creating a media continuum of incidents that are going on and on, to the point where they may actually be, people who have problems may actually be planning to jump on to the tail of terrorist attacks, so like we saw in Orlando, to carry out their own operations, which have nothing to do with terrorism.
And even though this is nothing about terrorism, it does seem to me that what you're talking about has a similarity to ISIS, in that they feel every time that an ISIS-related attack gets pulled off, it makes other people feel confident that something that's been brewing in their minds can actually become reality.
You're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, in intelligence, we have this old phrase, the second attack is always an American. Throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, these attacks that, very big, large terrorist attacks, you would essentially, within a few weeks, have a small-scale attack by somebody with a mental health issue. Case in point, a few weeks after the World Trade Center attack, there was actually a young man who had a mental health problem who flew an airplane into a tower in Florida. We had another one of a guy who was disgruntled anti-government worker, flew an airplane into an IRS building in Texas. These are just copycats, which may have nothing to do with terrorism, but which keep up the intensity of the media campaign for terrorism's, sphere of activity.
The other thing we've been seeing is these targeted attacks, as we saw in Dallas with looking for police. Here we are with 9 people dead. 3 were 14 years old. 2 were 15 years old. The others were 17, 19, 20, and 45. So all but 2 teenagers, and one of those was 20 years old.
Right.
You have to think that this was somebody who wasn't happy in his own teenage life and was going after other teenagers, or am I leaping too far in my analysis?
No, because it's like you said, this individual had his own problem. There was a discussion with him that was being shouted by some people that were yelling at him. And he had mentioned that he had been mentally, been under mental health treatment and had been hospitalized. But it was done in such a way that it suddenly came onto equal level with the pantheon of terrorism. So imagine a shooting like Columbine, all right, with the exact same global resources that we see for the attack that occurred yesterday. And what you'll have is this sort of nexus of psychodrama playing into the terrorism media world. It could really create a contagion of activities and incidents that may pop up in the future, which would never have been seen before.
And continue to be, and I think will be even more, talked about on the campaign trail here in the States. Thank you so much, Malcolm. Malcolm Nance. Appreciate it.